Jake Morrison was having a pretty ordinary Tuesday when everything went sideways. He was floating in his tiny university satellite, checking the solar panel readings for his engineering project, when something huge and silver appeared outside his window. The thing was massive, easily the size of a football stadium, with smooth curves and lights that pulsed in patterns that made his eyes water. "Well, that's new," Jake said to nobody in particular, taking another bite of his meat pie. The satellite shuddered, and Jake felt a weird tingling sensation wash over his body. The next thing he knew, he was lying on what looked like a hospital bed made of crystal, staring up at three very tall, very pale creatures with too many eyes. "Good day," Jake said, sitting up and looking around. The room was blindingly white and clean, with walls that seemed to glow from within. "Nice place you've got here. Very shiny." The three aliens stepped back quickly, making high-pitched sounds that might have been words. They were about 7 feet tall, thin as pencils, with skin like pearl, and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on their elongated heads. Their mouths were tiny slits that barely moved when they spoke. One of them, wearing what looked like a lab coat made of liquid metal, stepped forward carefully. When it spoke, Jake heard the words inside his head rather than through his ears. "Human entity, please remain calm. You are experiencing first contact with the Zephyrian Scientific Collective. I am Chief Xenobiologist Cathara. We mean you no harm." Jake scratched his head and looked around the room again. "Right. Aliens then. Fair dinkum. So when do I get the anal probe?" The three Zephyrians exchanged glances, their 4 eyes blinking in sequence. Cathara's head tilted at an angle that would have broken a human neck. "Probe?" Cathara asked, the confusion clear even through the telepathic translation. "You know, the whole alien abduction thing. Bright lights, medical experiments, probing various bits. I've seen the movies, mate." The aliens huddled together, whispering in rapid clicks and whistles. Jake could hear them in his head, discussing something about unexpected behavioral patterns and lack of fear response typical of prey species. "We do not perform such procedures," Cathara finally said. "We are peaceful researchers studying primitive civilizations. We detected your small craft and believed it would be an excellent opportunity for controlled first contact." "Primitive?" Jake laughed. "Mate, I'll have you know this little satellite cost me 3 months of beer money to build. She's got solar panels, a basic computer, and everything." One of the other aliens, this one wearing what looked like a security uniform, stepped forward. Its name came through as something like Veltoth. "You show no signs of distress at being removed from your natural environment. This is unexpected." Jake shrugged. "Well, you seem friendly enough. Plus, this beats the hell out of my thermodynamics exam tomorrow. Can I get a beer, though? All this excitement's making me thirsty." The aliens exchanged more looks. Cathara touched a panel on the wall, and a small platform rose from the floor with a glass of clear liquid on it. "This is our standard hydration supplement. It contains all necessary minerals and vitamins for optimal biological function." Jake picked up the glass and sniffed it. It smelled like nothing and looked like water. He took a sip and made a face. "Tastes like water from the Murray River after a drought. You got anything with flavor? Maybe some hops in it?" "Hops?" Veltoth asked. "Beer ingredients, mate. Barley, hops, yeast. The good stuff." Jake reached into his backpack, which was sitting on a nearby table. The aliens tensed as he rummaged around inside. "Here we go." He pulled out a frozen meat pie wrapped in plastic. The alien stared as he unwrapped it and took a large bite without bothering to heat it up. "Human," Cathara said slowly. "That food item appears to be frozen." "Yeah, the satellite doesn't have a microwave. No worries, though. A cold pie's not too bad if you're hungry enough." Jake took another bite, chewing thoughtfully. "You blokes eat food, right? Or do you just drink that water stuff?" The third alien, whose name translated as something like Zixana, pulled out what looked like a tricorder and pointed it at Jake. The device started beeping rapidly, and her 4 eyes widened. "Cathara," she whispered, "the sodium levels in that food item would be lethal to our entire crew. The preservative chemicals alone should cause immediate organ failure in any known biological system." Jake overheard the telepathic conversation and grinned. "Yeah, Mrs. Murphy's meat pies aren't exactly health food, but they're cheap and they fill you up. Want a bite?" All 3 aliens stepped back quickly, and Veltov's hand moved to something that looked like a weapon on his belt. "No thank you," Cathara said carefully. "We subsist on carefully balanced nutrient solutions designed to optimize our biological processes." "Sounds boring," Jake said, finishing the pie and licking his fingers. "So what's the plan then? You going to study me? Take me back to your home planet? I've got to warn you, I'm probably not the best example of humanity. I once got kicked out of a library for arguing with the books." "You argued with books?" Zixana asked. "They were wrong about drop bears. Completely wrong." Jake stood up and stretched, looking around the room with interest. "This is a pretty neat ship you've got here. How's it work? Some kind of warp drive? Hyperspace? Please tell me it's not powered by crystals or positive thinking." Cathara looked at her colleagues, then back at Jake. "We use quantum field manipulation to achieve faster-than-light travel. The technology is far beyond your species' current understanding." "Right on," Jake said cheerfully. "Mind if I have a look around? I promise not to touch anything important. Well, I'll try not to touch anything important. I'm pretty good with machinery, though. Fixed my mate's car with a coat hanger and some duct tape last week." The 3 aliens had another rapid conversation that Jake couldn't quite follow. Finally, Cathara nodded slowly. "Very well, human Jake Morrison. We will provide you with a brief tour of our vessel. Please remain close, and do not touch any control surfaces." "No worries, mate," Jake said, already heading for the door. "This is going to be fun." Behind him, the 3 aliens exchanged worried glances as they followed their surprisingly relaxed guest into the corridor. The Zephyrian ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The corridors curved and flowed, as if they had been grown rather than built, with soft light emanating from the walls themselves. Everything was spotlessly clean and perfectly organized, making Jake feel somewhat underdressed in his faded university t-shirt and cargo shorts. "This is our main engineering section," Cathara explained as they entered a vast chamber filled with humming machinery. "The quantum field generators maintain our faster-than-light capabilities, while the artificial gravity systems keep us oriented properly in space." Jake whistled appreciatively, hands shoved deep in his pockets to avoid touching anything. "Very impressive. Must cost a fortune to run, though. What's your fuel efficiency like?" "Fuel efficiency?" Veltoth asked, his 4 eyes blinking in confusion. "Yeah, you know, how many kilometers per liter? Miles per gallon? How far can you go before you need to fill up?" The aliens exchanged glances again. Jake was starting to recognize that look. "Our power systems draw energy directly from the quantum foam that underlies reality itself," Cathara explained slowly. "We do not require filling up." "Unlimited free energy from the universe itself," Jake said, nodding. "That's brilliant. My old Holden could barely make it to the shops without needing a drink. You blokes have really sorted things out." They continued the tour, with the aliens proudly showing off their technology. The food replicators could create any molecular structure they desired. The computer systems could process information faster than entire planets full of biological brains. The medical bay could heal almost any injury or disease. Jake listened politely to each explanation, asking practical questions that seemed to confuse his hosts. When they showed him the food replicator, he asked if it could make coffee. When they demonstrated their medical scanners, he wanted to know if they could fix a hangover. When they explained their computer's vast intelligence, he asked if it could help him with his taxes. Your questions are unusual, Zixana observed as they entered what looked like a cafe area. Most primitive species are overwhelmed by our technological superiority. Well, technology's just tools, isn't it? Jake said, settling into a chair that molded itself to fit his body. Very fancy tools, but still just ways to get things done. Speaking of which, any chance that replicator can make a decent cup of coffee? That water you gave me earlier was a bit ordinary. Kethara touched a control panel, and a cup materialized on the table in front of Jake. Steam rose from the dark liquid inside. Our finest synthetic caffeine beverage, she announced proudly. Perfectly balanced for optimal stimulation without negative side effects. Jake picked up the cup and took a careful sip. His face went through several expressions before settling on polite disappointment. Right, he said slowly. That's coffee, technically. Sort of like how a bicycle is technically a vehicle. Any chance you could add some actual coffee flavor to it? Maybe make it taste like something other than warm brown water? The aliens looked confused. Zixana scanned the liquid with her medical device. The molecular structure is precisely calibrated, she said. It contains the exact chemical compounds necessary for caffeine delivery. Yeah, but it tastes like dishwater, Jake said gently. Coffee's supposed to have personality, you know? This stuff's like drinking liquid beige. Veltoth stepped forward, clearly frustrated. Perhaps you would prefer to see our combat training facilities? We take great pride in our defensive capabilities. Combat training? Jake perked up. Now you're talking. I thought you said you were peaceful researchers. We are, Veltoth said quickly. But one must be prepared for hostile encounters. The galaxy can be dangerous for the unprepared. They moved through the ship to a large chamber with a high ceiling. Holographic targets appeared in the air, and several Zephyrians moved through an elaborate routine with energy weapons. Their movements were graceful and precise, like a deadly ballet. Jake watched with interest as the aliens glided between targets, firing beams of light that struck with surgical precision. Their entire philosophy seemed based on minimal force and maximum efficiency. Every movement was calculated to disable rather than destroy. Very nice, Jake said when the demonstration finished. Very elegant. You've really mastered the art of conflict resolution through superior technology. You approve? Veltoth asked, seeming pleased. Oh yeah, it's impressive as hell. Very civilized. Jake scratched his chin thoughtfully. Mind if I ask though, what do you do if someone gets up close, like inside the range of those energy weapons? Close combat is not generally necessary, Veltoth said. Our weapons have excellent range and accuracy. Right, but hypothetically, what if someone got past all that? What if they were too close for the fancy shooting? The aliens looked at each other uncertainly. Such a scenario would be unlikely, Kethara said. Fair enough. Different worlds, different problems, I suppose. Jake looked around the training chamber with interest. Mind if I have a go? I promise not to break anything. Veltoth hesitated. The weapons are calibrated for Zephyrian physiology. Dangerous for your species. I'll be careful, Jake promised. Just want to see how they feel. After a brief telepathic discussion, Veltoth handed Jake what looked like a crystal rifle. It was surprisingly light and warm to the touch. Simply point and activate the firing stud, Veltoth explained. The weapon will automatically adjust for optimal targeting. Jake hefted the weapon, testing its balance. Nice construction, good weight distribution. He raised it and pointed at one of the holographic targets. So I just pull this bit here? A beam of blue light shot out, striking the target dead center. The target flickered and disappeared. Excellent, Kethara said. Your hand-eye coordination is quite remarkable for a primitive species. Primitive? Jake lowered the weapon and grinned. Mate, you should see what we get up to back home. I once got in a bar fight with a crocodile. The aliens went very still. Crocodile? Zixana asked slowly. Yeah, big angry lizard thing, about 4 meters long, all teeth and attitude. Someone bet me I couldn't wrestle it. Jake shrugged. Turned out I could, but just barely. Had to buy the pub a new pool table afterward. Veltoth was taking rapid notes on a small device. You fought a predatory reptile? For recreation? Well, for beer money, really. But yeah, it was pretty fun once I got the hang of it. Trick is to keep away from the bitey end and hold on tight to the other bit. The three aliens were now having a very intense telepathic conversation. Jake caught fragments of it. Apex predator encounters, recreational combat, possible super soldier variant. Everything all right? Jake asked. You blokes look a bit worried. No, Cathara said quickly. We are simply impressed by your casual attitude toward dangerous wildlife. Oh, that's nothing, Jake said cheerfully. Australia's full of things that'll kill you. Spiders, snakes, jellyfish, drop bears. You just learn to deal with it. Part of growing up, really. Behind him, Veltoth continued taking frantic notes, while Zixana's medical scanner beeped continuously as she pointed it at Jake's relaxed form. The alarms started wailing, just as Jake was asking about lunch. The soft lighting in the corridors switched to an angry red, and automated voices began announcing something, in rapid Zephyrian, that the translation system couldn't keep up with. What's all the fuss about? Jake asked, having to raise his voice over the noise. Cathara was already moving quickly down the corridor, her long legs carrying her faster than Jake could comfortably walk. Critical system failure, she called back. We are caught in a debris field near a dying star. Radiation levels are approaching lethal limits. They arrived at what was obviously the ship's command center. It was a circular room with a massive holographic display in the center, showing their situation in 3 dimensions. Jake could see their ship as a small blue dot surrounded by spinning chunks of metal and rock, all of it bathed in angry red light from a nearby star that was clearly having a bad time. How bad is it? Jake asked, studying the display. Very bad, Veltoth answered, his 4 eyes all focused on different readouts. Our main power coupling was damaged by debris impact. Without it, our shields will fail within 2 hours. When that happens, the radiation will cook us all in minutes. Right, Jake said, rolling up his sleeves. What do we need to do to fix it? The aliens all turned to stare at him. We? Zixana asked. Yeah, we. You've got a problem. I'm here. Might as well help out. What needs fixing? Cathara pointed to a section of the holographic display. The primary quantum coupling array is located in the outer hull section, but the radiation levels there are already beyond our survival limits. Even in our best environmental suits, we could not survive more than 6 hours of exposure. 6 hours? Jake asked. How long would the actual repair take? Perhaps 20 minutes, if performed quickly and efficiently. Jake nodded thoughtfully. So you just need someone to go out there, swap out some parts, and come back. Sounds doable. Doable? Veltoth's voice rose in pitch. The radiation levels would be lethal to any biological organism. The vacuum of space alone would kill you in seconds. Maybe for you blokes, Jake said cheerfully, but I'm pretty hardy. Mind if I have a look at those environmental suits? The aliens led him to what they called the emergency preparation chamber. The suits were clearly designed for beings much taller and thinner than humans. They looked like they were made of living metal that flowed and adapted to the wearer's body. These are our most advanced survival systems, Zixana explained. They provide complete life support, radiation shielding, and protection from vacuum exposure. But even they would not be sufficient for current conditions. Jake picked up one of the suits and examined it. Fancy. Very fancy. Probably cost more than my car. He set it down and started walking toward what looked like an airlock. But I think I'll pass. Pass? Cathara hurried after him. You cannot survive in vacuum without protection. Sure I can, Jake said, pulling a small knife from his pocket and examining the airlock mechanism. I mean, it won't be comfortable, but I've held my breath longer than 20 minutes before, swimming competition back in high school. The aliens were having another frantic telepathic conversation, but Jake was focused on the airlock. The mechanism was more sophisticated than anything he'd seen before, but the basic principle was the same as any door. "Jake," Veltov said urgently, "you do not understand. The vacuum of space will cause your blood to boil. The radiation will destroy your cellular structure. The temperature differential will freeze you solid." "Sounds rough," Jake agreed, using his knife to carefully probe the airlock's control panel. "But I'm tougher than I look. Plus, someone's gotta do it, right? You blokes can't survive out there, and I'm not ready to die in a fancy alien spaceship when there's perfectly good work to be done." Before anyone could stop him, Jake had somehow convinced the airlock to open. Warning lights flashed, and the ship's computer began announcing emergency protocols in increasingly urgent tones. "Jake, stop!" Cathara reached for him, but Jake was already stepping into the airlock chamber. "No worries, mate," he called back with a grin. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. Maybe grab me a sandwich while I'm gone?" Something with actual flavor this time. The inner door sealed, and Jake could see the aliens frantically working at control panels through the transparent wall. He gave them a cheerful wave, took a deep breath, and hit the button to cycle the outer door. The sensation of stepping into space was unlike anything Jake had ever experienced. The cold hit him first, a cold so intense it went beyond temperature into something else entirely. His ears popped as the pressure changed, and he could feel his skin tingling as it adapted to the new environment. But he didn't die. Somehow, impossibly, Jake found himself floating in the void between stars, completely unprotected, and still breathing. Well, not breathing exactly, but not needing to breathe either. It was like his body had simply decided that the normal rules didn't apply right now. "Bit nippy out here," he muttered to himself, though there was no air to carry the sound. He could see the damage to the ship's hull easily enough. A chunk of debris about the size of a car had punched through the outer plating, exposing a mess of crystalline components that sparked with angry energy. Some of the crystals were cracked, others were missing entirely. Jake pushed himself toward the damaged section, moving with the awkward grace of someone who'd learned to swim in the Murray River. The radiation from the dying star washed over him in waves he could actually feel, like standing too close to a bonfire, but his skin just tingled and adapted. The repair itself was straightforward once he got a closer look. The damaged crystals needed to be removed and replaced with new ones from the storage panel nearby. It was basically the same as changing a fuse, just with more sparkly bits and cosmic radiation. Jake set to work, using his pocket knife as an improvised tool. The crystalline components were tougher than they looked, but they came free with the right amount of leverage and creative swearing. The replacement pieces fitted together like an alien jigsaw puzzle. Inside the ship, 3 Zephyrians and their entire crew watched their sensors in disbelief as Jake's vital signs remained stable in conditions that should have killed him 7 different ways. His body temperature was adapting to the cold. His blood pressure was somehow maintaining itself despite vacuum exposure. The radiation that was slowly cooking their ship's outer hull seemed to be having no effect on him whatsoever. "This is scientifically impossible," Zyxana whispered, staring at her medical readouts. "His cellular structure should be breaking down," Cathara added, equally bewildered. "His blood should be boiling," Veltov concluded. On their screens, Jake gave them a thumbs up and began pushing himself back toward the airlock, the repair completed ahead of schedule. 20 minutes later, Jake tumbled back through the airlock, shivering and grinning. His hair was frosted with ice crystals, and his skin had a slight blue tinge, but he was undeniably alive and unharmed. "Fixed," he announced, brushing ice off his shirt. "Wasn't too bad once you got used to it, though I could really go for that sandwich now, and maybe a beer. Or 12. The 3 aliens stared at him in complete silence. "What?" Jake asked, noticing their expressions. Did I miss something? Behind them, the ship's systems hummed back to life as the repaired components restored full power. The radiation warnings stopped, the red lights returned to their normal soft glow, and the immediate crisis passed. But for the Zephyrians, a much larger problem was just beginning to emerge. Word traveled fast through Zephyrian space. Within hours of Jake's spacewalk, encrypted messages were flying between ships, and emergency protocols were being activated at the highest levels of their government. A human had survived unprotected space exposure, performed complex repairs in lethal radiation, and showed no signs of distress about any of it. Admiral Korthek arrived 3 days later with a battle fleet. Jake had spent those 3 days making friends with the crew, teaching them card games, and gradually improving the food replicator by adding what he called actual seasoning to its molecular database. He'd also somehow fixed their computer's tendency to be overly formal by teaching it sarcasm and Australian slang. "G'day, Admiral," Jake said cheerfully, when the tall, imposing figure materialized in the transport beam. Korthek was even more intimidating than the others, with ceremonial scars across his elongated head, and what was obviously military bearing in every movement. "Human," Korthek replied, his mental voice sharp and controlled. "I have come to assess the threat level your species represents." "Threat level?" Jake laughed. "Mate, I'm an engineering student from Melbourne. The biggest threat I represent is to the coffee supplies and maybe the local pub's pool table." The Admiral was not amused. He brought with him a full tactical assessment team, all of them armed with the most advanced weapons the Zephyrian military possessed. They spread out around the room, studying Jake like he was a dangerous animal. "Our reports indicate you survived exposure to hard vacuum and lethal radiation for extended periods," Korthek stated. "This suggests advanced biological modifications or unknown technology." "Nah, just held my breath and tried not to think about how cold it was," Jake said, settling into one of the chairs that molded itself to his body. "Wasn't that bad, really. Bit like swimming at the beach in winter." The tactical team exchanged rapid communications that Jake couldn't quite follow. Something about impossible biological parameters and potential super soldier variants. "I demand a demonstration of your military capabilities," Admiral Korthek announced. Jake scratched his head. "Military capabilities? I'm not military, mate. I'm studying to be an engineer. Though I suppose I could show you how we settle disagreements back home, if you're interested." "Yes," the Admiral said immediately. "Show us your combat protocols." "Right then," Jake said, standing up. "You'll need some open space. Maybe a field or something. And we'll need teams." An hour later, they were in the ship's largest cargo bay, which had been hastily cleared of equipment. Jake had somehow convinced the Admiral and his tactical team that the best way to understand human capabilities was through what he called a friendly match of footy. The Zephyrians had no idea what they'd agreed to. "Okay," Jake said, standing in the middle of the cleared space with a ball he'd improvised from synthetic materials. "Australian rules football. Simple game. 2 teams, 1 ball. Try to get it between those posts down there." He pointed to some cargo containers he'd arranged as goals. "Few basic rules. No weapons, no killing. Try not to break anything too expensive." "No weapons?" one of the tactical officers asked, confused. "It's a sport, mate. We use our hands and feet and heads. Sometimes shoulders if you're feeling fancy." Admiral Korthek assigned his entire security detail to one team. 12 of the finest Zephyrian warriors, trained in combat across 3 galactic systems, equipped with personal energy shields and enhanced reflexes. Jake would be playing alone. "Bit unfair odds," Jake observed, "but should be fun anyway. You blokes ready?" The Zephyrians activated their combat systems. Energy fields shimmered around their bodies, their enhanced reflexes kicked in, and their tactical computers began calculating optimal strategies. They were prepared for war. Jake tossed the ball in the air and caught it with one hand. What happened next would be discussed in Zephyrian military academies for generations. Jake moved like nothing they'd ever encountered. Not faster than their enhanced reflexes could follow, but differently. Where they expected him to go, he wasn't. Where they thought he couldn't possibly be, he was. He treated their energy shields like suggestion rather than absolute barriers, somehow bouncing off them in ways that the shield's designers had never intended. "Sorry, mate," Jake called out cheerfully as he somehow ricocheted off one warrior's shield, spun around another, and kicked the ball through the goals. 1-0 to the humans. The tactical team regrouped, activated additional defensive protocols, and coordinated their attack patterns. Jake waited patiently while they discussed strategy. "Take your time," he said, stretching his legs, "though the gravity's a bit light in here. Makes the footwork interesting." They tried again. This time they used formation tactics that had defeated armies across multiple star systems. Jake somehow got past all of them while humming what sounded like a drinking song, scored another goal, and asked if anyone wanted to take a break. "This is just a warm-up, right? Wait till you see what we're like when we're actually trying." Admiral Korthek was taking frantic notes on his command tablet. The ship's sensors were recording everything, analyzing Jake's movement patterns, trying to understand how a single unaugmented biological organism was systematically defeating their most advanced warriors. "Perhaps," one of the tactical officers suggested after Jake's fifth goal, "we should activate lethal countermeasures." "It's just a game," Jake protested, overhearing the telepathic conversation. "No need to get serious about it. Though if you want to try rugby next, that might be more your speed. Bit more contact involved." The word rugby sent the tactical team into emergency consultations. "What is rugby?" Admiral Korthek asked carefully. "Like footy, but you can pick up the ball and run with it. More tackling involved. Great sport. Very social. Good for building character and emergency room attendance records." The Zephyrians had another hurried conference. "Tactical Officer Nexstar will engage in single combat," the Admiral announced. Nexstar was the largest Zephyrian on the ship, heavily augmented with military cybernetics and trained in 17 different martial arts. His energy shield could deflect projectile weapons, and his enhanced strength could crush steel. "Single combat?" Jake looked puzzled. "This isn't a fight, Nate. It's a sport. Nobody's supposed to get hurt." "Demonstrate your combat superiority," Admiral Korthek ordered. Jake shrugged. "If you insist, but I'm warning you, I play a bit rough sometimes." Nexstar activated his full combat systems and charged. His enhanced reflexes made him faster than humanly possible. His tactical computers calculated the optimal attack pattern. His energy shield would protect him from any counterattack. Jake stepped sideways, stuck out his foot, and Nexstar went flying into a wall. "Oops," Jake said, hurrying over to help the warrior up. "You all right there? Sorry about that. Bit of an accident." Nexstar tried to stand, his systems recalibrating. Jake offered him a hand up, which somehow resulted in the heavily armored warrior being gently but firmly planted, face first, back on the floor. "I think you might be trying a bit too hard," Jake observed kindly. "It's supposed to be fun, not a life-or-death struggle. Here, let me show you the basic footwork." For the next 20 minutes, Jake patiently taught a squad of elite alien warriors how to play Australian football. They absorbed the lessons with the intensity of soldiers learning battlefield tactics, taking detailed notes on every technique. What they learned was that Jake seemed to view physical contact that would hospitalize most beings as casual social interaction. When he demonstrated a proper tackle, 3 warriors ended up in the medical bay for routine scans. When he showed them how to mark the ball, their energy shields registered impact forces that should have required heavy artillery. "Right," Jake said finally, slightly out of breath. "That's the basics. Good fun, eh? Nothing too serious. Just a friendly game between mates." Admiral Korthek gathered his tactical team for an emergency briefing, while Jake helped repair the minor damage to the cargo bay. "Assessment?" the Admiral asked. "Sir," Nexthar reported, "the human refers to combat maneuvers that could disable our best warriors as friendly games. His casual physical interactions register as significant kinetic events on our sensors." "He asked if we wanted to try something called rugby," another officer added. "When I asked him to describe it, he said it was like this but with more contact. I am not certain our medical facilities could handle more contact." "And he claims this is not military training," Admiral Korthek mused. "He insists these are recreational activities performed for enjoyment." He also mentioned something called cricket, and asked if we'd like to learn how to have a proper Barbie. I have not translated these terms yet, but I fear they may represent additional combat scenarios. Admiral Korthek looked at his tactical analysis of the past few hours. A single human, claiming to be a student, had defeated his entire security team while treating the encounter as casual entertainment. And according to the human, this was just playing around. "Recommendation?" he asked. His tactical team exchanged glances. "Sir," Nexthar said carefully, "I recommend we return the human to his home planet immediately and declare the entire solar system a restricted zone." The Zephyrian High Council emergency session was called at 0300 Standard Time, which meant it was really important. Representatives from across their space gathered in the Great Crystal Chamber, their elongated forms creating an eerie forest of shadows in the dim light. Admiral Korthek stood before the assembly, his report data crystal glowing in his extended palm. "Honored counselors," he began, "I have completed my assessment of the human species. My recommendation is immediate classification as a Category 9 existential threat, with permanent quarantine protocols for their entire solar system." A ripple of shock went through the council chamber. Category 9 was reserved for planet-killer weapons and reality-warping entities. "Explain," commanded High Counselor Yethmira, her 4 eyes glowing with interest. "The human specimen displays impossible biological characteristics," Admiral Korthek reported. "It survived hard vacuum exposure, lethal radiation, and extreme temperature variations without protection. When questioned about this, it claimed the experience was a bit nippy and asked for a sandwich." More shocked murmurs from the assembly. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, "The human demonstrated combat capabilities that overwhelmed our finest warriors. It defeated our entire tactical team, while claiming to be engaged in recreational activities. When asked about formal military training, it denied having any, insisting these were merely games played for entertainment." "Games?" High Counselor Veldroth asked. "Yes, Counselor. The human referred to combat maneuvers capable of disabling our best soldiers as having a bit of fun with the boys. It also mentioned other activities called rugby, cricket, and something involving the ceremonial cooking of food outdoors." Back on the research ship, Jake was helping Kethara improve the food replicator's coffee function. He'd managed to convince it to produce something that actually resembled coffee, though it still needed work. "Not bad," he said, taking a sip of the latest attempt. "Still tastes a bit like it was made by robots, but definitely an improvement. You just need to add more character to it." "Character?" Kethara asked, making notes on her datapad. "Yeah, coffee should have personality. This stuff's getting there, but it needs more, I don't know, more attitude. More like it's got stories to tell." Kethara had given up trying to understand Jake's culinary philosophy. Over the past week, he'd somehow improved their entire food system by adding what he called proper flavor and a bit of personality to their molecular databases. The ship's computer now produced meals that actually tasted like something other than optimized nutrition paste. He'd also taught their AI system to understand jokes, sarcasm, and what he called taking the piss. The computer had gone from speaking in formal protocols to greeting crew members with "G'day, mate, What can I do for you? It had been an alarming adjustment for everyone except Jake. Jake, Zixana said, entering the food preparation area. We have received new orders from our command structure. Orders? Jake looked up from his coffee improvements. Nothing bad, I hope? We have been instructed to return you to your home planet immediately. Jake's face fell slightly. Oh, right then. I suppose I have overstayed my welcome. Not at all, Cathara said quickly. Your presence has been educational. It is simply that our superiors believe extended contact might be problematic. Fair enough, Jake said, finishing his coffee. I should probably get back anyway. Got that thermodynamics exam to fail, and my mates will be wondering where I've gone. The trip back to Earth took 2 days. Jake spent the time teaching Veltoth how to play poker, badly, showing Zixana pictures of Australian wildlife, which required medical intervention when she saw the huntsman spider photos, and generally being helpful around the ship. Meanwhile, the Zephyrian High Council was receiving additional reports from their xenobiologists. The humans' casual mentions of native fauna are particularly disturbing, Dr. Cathara reported via subspace communication. It described creatures called drop bears that apparently hunt from tree canopy, huntsman spiders the size of dinner plates, and something called a box jellyfish that it claims can kill in minutes. When asked about these creatures, the humans simply said they were part of growing up, and you just learn to deal with it. It also mentioned, Zixana added, that its planet has sharks, crocodiles, dingoes, and snakes that'll kill you as soon as look at you. When I expressed concern about such dangerous conditions, the human laughed and said, "That's just Australia, mate. Everywhere else is safer." The council chamber fell silent. This human claims its planet has regions more dangerous than what it considers normal. High Counselor Yethmira asked. It spoke fondly of something called the Outback, where you can walk for 1,000 kilometers and not see another living soul, except for the things trying to eat you. It described this as good for building character. The vote was unanimous. Solar System Sol 3 would be placed on the permanent restricted list, with warning beacons deployed at maximum safe distance. Jake's return to Earth was gentle and precise. The Zephyrians positioned his small satellite exactly where they'd found it, with all systems restored and improved. They'd even upgraded his solar panels and computer systems, though they disguised the improvements to look like human technology. Right then, Jake said as he prepared to transfer back to his satellite. This has been brilliant. Thanks for the tour, the food improvements, and the zero-gravity football match. You're a good bunch, even if you are a bit anxious about everything. Jake, Admiral Korthek said formally, if any of your species make contact with ours in the future, please inform them that the Zephyrian Collective wishes only peaceful relations. No worries, mate, Jake said cheerfully, though you might want to relax a bit. Life's too short to spend it worrying about every little thing. You should come visit Australia sometime. I'll take you to a proper pub, maybe throw some prawns on the barbie. We could go swimming at the beach, check out some of the local wildlife. Should be a real ripper of a time. The three Zephyrians exchanged horrified glances at the mention of additional recreational activities involving Australian fauna. We will consider that invitation, Cathara said carefully. Great. Just give me a call if you're ever in the neighborhood, Jake said, waving as he floated back toward his satellite. And remember what I taught you about the coffee. Personality matters. As Jake's satellite drifted away toward Earth, the Zephyrian fleet immediately jumped to the far side of the galaxy. Their final log entry was marked with the highest security classification possible. Species assessment complete. Humans appear friendly and peaceful, but their definition of friendly activities includes recreational combat with apex predators and survival training in environments lethal to most known life forms. Cultural exchange protocols deemed inadvisable for crew psychological stability. Recommend permanent avoidance of Sol system and all human colonies. Add note to database. If humans offer to show you their local wildlife or invite you to have a Barbie, politely decline and retreat to safe distance. 3 days later, Jake walked into his thermodynamics class at Melbourne University, where Professor Williams was taking attendance. "Morrison, Jake?" she called out. "Present," Jake replied, settling into his usual seat near the back. "Where have you been for the past week?" Professor Williams asked. "You missed your satellite telemetry presentation." Jake scratched his head thoughtfully. "Sorry about that, Prof. Had some technical difficulties with the satellite. Met some interesting folks who helped me sort it out, though." "Technical difficulties?" "Yeah, nothing major. Just needed some percussive maintenance and a bit of creative problem solving. All fixed now, though. Should have some pretty good data for the final report." Professor Williams made a note on her tablet and moved on with the class. Jake pulled out his notebook and started copying down equations, already thinking about lunch and whether the campus coffee shop had improved their terrible coffee. He never mentioned the week he'd spent teaching aliens how to play football and improving their food replicators. It seemed like the sort of thing people might not believe. Meanwhile, several hundred light-years away, the Zephyrian research vessel, Harmonious Inquiry, was filing the most unusual first contact report in their species' history. In the conclusion, Admiral Korthek wrote, "Humans remain classified as friendly but dangerous. Their capacity for adaptation, survival, and casual violence appears limitless, yet they show no awareness of their own capabilities. Recommend continued avoidance until we develop better understanding of how a species can be simultaneously harmless and terrifying. Also recommend improved coffee production technology before any future contact attempts." The report was sealed, classified, and filed in the deepest archives of Zephyrian space. Next to it, a note was added to the Sol Systems file. "Warning: inhabitants consider lethal environments character building and apex predator encounters recreational activities. Approach with extreme caution. Do not accept invitations to social gatherings." And in Melbourne, Jake Morrison finished his thermodynamics exam, grabbed a meat pie for lunch, and went home to work on his next engineering project, completely unaware that he had single-handedly convinced an entire galactic civilization to avoid his species for the foreseeable future. It had been a pretty good week, all things considered.